So I am recording now. So what you should see on your screen, hopefully, is a prompt to say if you agree and accept this webinar being recorded. Click OK, and that'll allow you to continue to stay on the webinar. However, if you don't click OK, you will eventually be kicked off. So hopefully you're okay with that, and so we can show this in the future. So this will be recorded. So welcome everyone. This is the Central Indiana ASSP, American Society of Safety Professionals, first webinar, I believe. And we are focusing today on the emerging professionals. And my name is Jeff Fox. I am the Central Indiana president. And so welcome everyone. I'm hosting the webinar today, so I just wanted to give you guys a few housekeeping items. So we hope this to be a very interactive session. So when times come, when the presenters pose questions or ask for if anyone has any questions, there are a couple ways to do that. Currently, most everyone on the webinar is muted. So you can come off of mute by going down to participants, clicking on participants, finding your name and click unmute. Also, we encourage you to use the chat function. So if you click on chat, you can type a question into there, and then at certain times throughout the meeting, we'll stop the presenters and see if there's any questions. So I think that's it as far as housekeeping. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce Carl Weiser. He is our Emerging Professionals Chair for part of the Central Indiana ASSP group, and he will kind of give you a background on his kind of goal for this webinar and introduce the speakers. So Carl? Carl, I think you may still be on mute.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Laura and Erica, for helping conduct this webinar. As Jeff said, I am the chair for the Emerging Safety Professionals for Central Indiana ASSP. The goal of this webinar is to emphasize the importance of a well-written resume and how to stand out during an interview. In today's competitive safety market, an effective resume and interview skills can open up a variety of opportunities and make you stand out from your peers. This webinar will assist participants learn how to effectively highlight their knowledge, experiences, and abilities on the resume and during interviews to become better prepared for the interview approach employers are most likely to use today. As Jeff said, during the presentation, please feel free to ask questions that come up. And I will now turn over to Erica to begin this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing Laura and I the opportunity to speak with you guys this morning. During our time together, we'll talk about resumes, phone interviews, and on-site interviews. After each section, we will open up chat for any questions that you may have. Laura and I will now take a moment to introduce ourselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Botrytis-Dahl, and I've been a nationwide environmental health and safety recruiter since 1990, so I'm actually going on 30 years this year. I started when safety was really kind of a piece of the maintenance department or HR department, so it's been a great transition and evolved over all those years. But I placed candidates EH&S within, pretty much like 2+ years of experience. I have placed some fresh grads over the years, but majority of my clients are in the manufacturing sector, so more like plant, divisional, regional type, corporate type roles. But I also work with other clients in construction, consulting, and insurance loss control. So, Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica Hinadeski, and I work for a nationally recognized professional service organization that provides workplace safety, consulting, training, staffing, safety program planning, and implementation. In my role at Safety Management Group, I recruit for our safety staffing division. These positions can be short-term, long-term projects, or new construction projects. We have associates all over the U.S. and even into Alaska. These projects can be in general industry, construction, automotive, utility, pharmaceuticals, just to name a few. Laura will be handling our first topic. So let's jump right into resumes.
Okay, so so basically, as an AHS recruiter, I've really have seen thousands of resumes over the years, and whether you're early in your career or more seasoned, it's really important to make sure that your resume is easy to read, by choosing one style of font and color, along with other, with all the other correct words within the text in order to be identified by the employer as a potential candidate for the position. Um, why do you need to build an effective resume? 70% of candidates applying through a company applicant tracking system will not make it to the hiring manager's hands because of the ranking systems they now use within that software. Then the hiring manager really spends less than 10 seconds reviewing a resume before making a determination if they'd like to interview that candidate. Even as a an EHS recruiter, I kind of do the same thing. I scan through a resume quickly to see if it fits my client's needs, and then if it does, I'll call that person immediately to discuss the role in detail and then kind of start the process from there. So therefore, when you're applying for a safety position online, you really need to tailor your resume for each particular role. So if you have the experience that the employer is looking for based on their job description, make sure that those keywords match up to the job description, within the resume. So, obviously be honest and only put those keywords that you have experience with, because companies will, talk to you about that, and you really need to explain yourself in the future. So, there are a couple of different formats out there. The couple that are very, common that I see all the time in Erica are chronological and functional. So Erica will, now discuss those differences.
When writing a resume, it's always nice to have it in chronological order, which means your most recent position first. By starting with the most recent position first is showing the employer that you have the experience and skills needed for the position. A functional resume focuses on your skills and experience rather than your work history. These types of resumes are typically used by job seekers who are changing careers, who have gaps in their employment, and whose work history doesn't directly relate to the job that they're applying for. With that being said, let's talk briefly about longevity. So go along with functional resumes, it's important to many employers that you show your accomplishment in each role. As a safety professional, it takes time to create, implement, and see your results, whether your career is in manufacturing, consulting, or construction. When leaving a job after only a year, an employer may see this as you not being able to follow through. It takes time to achieve results in safety. Stay at least 3 years and show your commitment and loyalty. Stay in the course, and thinking long term will help you to build a career.
So personally, kind of going back to the style of resumes, I personally prefer the traditional chronological resume. It's straightforward, easy to review, but most importantly, my client companies really tend to prefer that style as well. Again, kind of in the industrial sector. A one-page resume is pretty typical for a fresh graduate with internship, and as your experience grows throughout your career, a two-page resume is perfectly acceptable. I find that anything over 2 pages tends to lose the interest of the person reading it. I do sometimes see a third page, if someone's a little bit more seasoned, but more it's all like training and certifications, that type of thing. But really keeping it to 2 is ideal. I think, I can't say this enough. Please double, triple check your resume for spelling, grammatical errors, typos, and formatting issues. Really, you only have one chance to impress. A couple other points, I recommend not putting a picture of yourself on your resume. And then also don't use first person language such as I, we, or me. Really use strong action words in your resumes. Cover letters, I really don't see that much anymore. Reason being is that applicant tracking systems don't allow candidates to upload a cover letter. Therefore, again, it's really important just that you have all the right information in your resume. So I'm going to walk through a fresh grad resume, and then Erica after me is going to cover more of like a seasoned resume. And showing those formats. So here's an example of what I like to see in a basic fresh grad resume with internship experience. You know, as a fresh grad, you do not have a lot of professional experience outside of the classroom. Therefore, you really need to show that you have transferable skills from past experiences. Other attributes that you want to convey in your resume are your work ethic, motivation, and ability to learn quickly. Focus will be on your academic experience, internship, part-time job during college, extracurricular activities such as involvement in your school ASSP chapter or related groups, which will show the leadership side. Volunteer experiences show your ability to attain goals, and then athletic achievements are important too because it really shows your competitive side. All of these really kind of describe who you are as a person, and you want to bring that out in your resume. So I'll kind of walk through this. You know, the first thing I like, contact information. You know, at minimum, make sure your contact information has your name, city, state, zip code, phone number, email, and LinkedIn profile if appropriate. You know, I see a lot of resumes lately that only have your name and cell phone number on it. I understand the candidates are concerned about confidentiality, but recruiters like myself, we do candidate searches for our jobs, you know, by city and zip code. So if you don't have that on your resume, you know, you're not going to come up in our database searches and you're kind of going to get lost. So again, and then also make sure your email address is professional. I've seen some interesting ones over the years. Objective is no longer important. It's really obsolete, so don't put that on your resume. You know, you're applying to positions that, you know, directly to, you know, online websites to your companies. And then as a recruiter, you know, I just prefer getting an email from you, you know, letting me know who you are and then what job you're interested in talking about. So just to let you know that. And then the next part is important. So it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. You know, this is what you really need to make sure your resume is tailored to each job description so you apply to. So so that the applicant tracking system pulls those keywords off of your resumes. Focus on technical skills and competencies, you know, definitely hard skills such as ergonomics, program development, industrial hygiene. If you have an acronym like after your name, like GSP or CSP, make sure that's spelled out in this section, so certified safety professional or graduate. Don't put soft skills in this area like leadership or problem solver. You know, you really want to put that hard skill set on here. So next one is education, which is pretty self-explanatory. You know, if you have a good GPA, make sure you put that on there. Graduation date, don't put high school stuff on there. It's not important anymore, and it gives you more space on your resume to put the good stuff. The next one is employment history. So if you complete an internship during college, make sure you give those details about the company. This is what I like to see is kind of a little summary about what the company does, the size of the plant if you were at a site, you know, those type of things. So give details about the size of the plant, reporting structure, and then use action words to describe the specific responsibilities or project that you completed during the internship. For example, you know, updating a particular policy or program, and then how the company has benefited from your internship. So for example, revamp the lockout tagout program from ABC Chemical Company, which has since been implemented corporate-wide. Also, you know, many students also have part-time jobs during college. So be brief in your summary, but it's really important to have that on your resume too. This shows a potential employer that you are motivated, have potential leadership or management skills, and that can also balance multiple responsibilities at a time, so school and work. Again, an example, if you were a manager at a fast food restaurant, you know, describe any kind of leadership responsibilities you had, such as if you supervised a team, you opened or closed the restaurant, those type of responsibilities. Let's see here. Professional membership, volunteer achievements, that's another important section as a fresh grad. You know, were you an active member in your student ASSP chapter, any groups or related clubs, academic fraternities? Again, highlight that leadership side, volunteer, social fraternities, sororities, that can all be put on here too. And then the last one is if you're in athletics, again, put that on your resume. It's really important. So this kind of wraps up the fresh grad portion. Erica will now discuss an example of a more seasoned professional.
Thank you, Laura. As you can see from the more experienced safety professional resume, we should have it up on this slide coming up quickly.
Do you see it on here? Do you not see it, Erica?
I don't. Yes, there it is. Yeah,
oh, okay.
Thank you so much. As you can see from this experience safety professional resume, there are a few additional areas that you can add. These typically, like I said, you see more on experienced professionals, which would be the summary of qualifications, the accomplishments, achievements, and attributes. When it comes to the summary of qualifications, experienced safety professionals tend to use this area over new grads because it highlights what they bring to the table from their previous work experience. And it also adds value for potential employees who may be reviewing the resume. This doesn't have to be very long, just 2 or 3 lines and a summary of their soft skills. Similar to the new grad resume, give a brief summary of each employer, what the company manufactures, the scope of your role, for example, number of plants, number of employees, and number of direct reports, excuse me. If you are promoted within your company, list each job separately with the duties that you did and how long you held that position. Summarizing your responsibility and making sure that your responsibilities are not duplicated throughout your resume is key. We see that a lot where on a resume, someone will put that they worked at ABC company. They'll have the same duties and responsibilities listed for each one of their positions. When in that area, you want to make sure that you're able to tell us exactly what it is that you have done in each one of those positions. Go into details when it comes to those jobs and to those duties and responsibilities for all of your positions. Accomplishments, achievements, and attributes are key. Bullet points are a simple way to emphasize each accomplishment listed. Accomplishments examples could be program development, implementation of a new design system, being a key player in a plant startup. It could be matrix as far as accident reduction, worker compensation cost reduction, and being part of a safety culture change, things like that. As an experienced safety professional, it takes time to create, implement, and see your results. Employers will appreciate the longevity and loyalty that you have given to each one of your employers. So why should you keep your resume updated? Some of the reasons why you want to keep your resume updated is because it can be intimidating to write a resume. So when you have it put together, it won't be a daunting task to keep it updated in the future. If you update it regularly, you will remember the accomplishments and projects that you've recently completed with each employer, and they will definitely appreciate that. If you see a job that you want to apply for, or if someone like Laura and I reaches out to you for a position, you can apply quickly. Timing is everything in a job search. And lastly, a company online application plays a huge part when it comes to your resume. If you're applying for a direct company website, sometimes you can parse your resume, which takes pieces from your resume and actually put it into the application. Other times you have to actually complete the application in its entirety. We highly recommend that you are completely honest on your application because it is considered a legal document. Before hitting the submit button, review your application to make sure everything is correct. Your application will follow you from the interview process all the way to the offer process. If your dates of employment are incorrect, or if you leave out a short-term project or a position that didn't work out, an employer can rescind their offer based on the information of your application not being correct. This is something that Laura and I have both seen firsthand. Before we move into interviewing, does anyone have any questions about resume writing?
Yes, there's one question that came in from Carl on the chat. It says, what qualifications stand out to applicants with similar job experiences?
Erica, you want to take that one?
I know.
Oh,
Sure. I know.
Okay.
I'm sure on my side, a lot of it is the qualification. If I'm just looking at a couple of resumes and I want to see how one person stands out on the other, it could be their certifications. Maybe someone has a certification that this position requires that someone does not. It could be longevity. How long have they been at their recent or most recent employer? Things like that.
I agree. That's exactly what I look for as well. Even again, kind of going back to the resume and kind of how they wrote it up, because we're always looking at, you know, how it's written. You know, just like employers, they look at your resume as a, you know, a document as to your style and how you can efficiently and concisely put your thoughts together. So those are always, you know, it's kind of the whole big picture.
Another question coming in from chat. If I have taken an OSHA training course, such as a HAZWOPER, but is now expired, should I keep it on my resume?
If it's expired, I would take it off your resume. Again, you just want your most accurate, you know, information on there. I've had candidates leave their CSP on there when it's no longer, and again, I've seen situations fall apart because of inaccurate information.
I would totally agree with that. If it's something that you want to have on your resume, I would at least put in parentheses that it has expired.
Yes.
That way, we as recruiters would know that.
Well, I think that's all the questions. Reminder, everyone, if you have any questions, please use the chat function or take yourself off mute.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll move on to interviewing then. Okay.
I do have one more question regarding resumes. This is Carl. Can you have too much information on your resume regarding the responsibilities related to your past work history?
Yeah, I think it, you know, again, it depends on, you know, I'm a big believer that, you know, if you have 10 years of experience or 30 years of experience, all of my clients want to see your work history from day one, you know, type of thing. And sometimes that can be a challenge if you know, have either had several jobs or, you know, just a lot of information. I think, you know, again, it depends on the kind of position you're applying for. If it's, you know, similar to what you've been doing, you know what I mean? You really want to highlight your most recent experience, but still show all of your work experience in the past, but maybe just shortened versions, if that makes sense. So it's really just kind of identifying, looking at each job separately and tailoring your resume accordingly. You know what I mean? I find that people who are maybe more seasoned, that are a corporate person right now that want to go back to a site level because they're just ready to take on less responsibility. You want to kind of tone down your corporate stuff and focus more on the plant stuff. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
And then we have one more question following that. What is the recommended length of a resume today? Comparing recently graduated to maybe 5 or 10 years of work experience.
Yeah, I'm Erica, and you can speak to this too. You know, a fresh grad is typically about a page. You know, seasoned person, honestly, like 2 to 3 pages for someone, you know, maybe 10 plus years of experience. And the third page is kind of a stretch, but I know it's hard, you know, to kind of condense everything. But again, I think I've seen some really nice resumes from people with 20 plus years of experience that have been able to put it into 2 pages. And they just did a really good job of, you know, fine tuning, you know, the thing. So it's a challenge, but 2 to 3 is okay for a senior level person. Erica, do you feel the same way, or what are your thoughts?
I would agree with that. I also think that as far as a seasoned professional would go, that's where they would want to use their accomplishments, their achievements, and then their attributes, like the resume that I had up for as an example. That way you can keep it within those 2.5 pages. I think anything past that, the recruiter would just become kind of, I don't want to say bored, but I'm going to, just by just reading information over and over again. So I would say just stick to the key points of your resume, especially pertaining to the position that you're applying for.
I agree. Any other questions? Should we move on to interviews then?
Yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I'll start with phone interviews, and then Erica's going to do more of the on-site interviewing piece. So from my experience, once a company identifies you as someone that they would like to pursue further in the process, you as a candidate really need to start preparing early for the phone screen. If you're working with a third-party recruiter like myself, I think you have a little bit of an advantage because we can give you some additional insight to the role, such as, specific technical needs that the hiring manager wants to see in the candidate outside of the job description, the best culture fit for their particular organization, reason why the job is open, kind of those, that type of information that's hard to find. Obviously, whether you're working with a recruiter like myself or not, make sure you know as much as possible about the company, job description, culture, and information about their EH&S performance. OSHA has, their website with, violations, from history, previous to, current, and, you can find out a company's permits. And so there's a lot of information out there, especially, again, understanding the company and kind of where they've been and where they want to go regarding EH&S. The first stage of really selling yourself to an employer, it's a balancing act of being able to sell yourself, but still showing that humility. My clients like to hear what you achieved in your position independently, and then also how you've accomplished things in a team situation. They want to make sure that you can work alone without a lot of hand-holding, and that you are also a productive team player. So again, it's that fine balance. The interview process can have many steps. I've seen it's not uncommon now for employers to have several phone interviews, especially right now, obviously in the situation we're in with COVID, but with various interviewers, because before they want to invite you in for an on-site interview. So don't be discouraged by that. Make sure you know who you'll be talking to ahead of time, because then you can really prepare differently for each one. Will you be talking to an HR manager, operations manager, plant manager, EH&S director? Each interviewer will be looking for different things during your conversations. Same kind of obviously goes for the on-site interviews, but be prepared to give examples of specific accomplishments, achievements, weaknesses. Be prepared to go into detail about what you put on your resume. So really know your resume inside and out. As you gain experience in the safety field, know your metrics and how you use those numbers to build upon and create new strategies concerning your company's safety systems. It can be very difficult to show your personality on a phone call, but this is so important because it'll really make the difference whether or not you'll be asked to take the next step in the interview process. I've had over the last several years, job descriptions where they wanted 10 years of experience. They ended up hiring someone 4 or 5 years of experience because they had those intangible skill sets, more that personality, that drive, that ambition, where they can teach you the technical stuff. They can't teach you that piece. So be an active listener, speak clearly and concisely, have a sense of humor, be flexible. If an employer is a few minutes late to the phone interview or has to reschedule, which happens all the time, definitely be understanding. And then show who you are as a person, your motivations, your ability to follow up, your ability to build relationships with people, desire to keep learning, all of those attributes. So some of the questions to ask during an interview, focus questions about the position and the company. Don't ask questions about salary range, benefits at this point in the process. You want to show the employer that you want to learn more about the role, the challenges, expectations, and then career path within the position. Wrap up the phone interview by thanking the interviewer for their time, and then let them know that you have continued interest if you do, obviously. If you have an interviewer's email address, it's also appropriate to send a brief thank you note. Again, really watch for errors and typos and things like that. I've had situations fall apart because of a thank you note. So also, one really important thing, make sure that you have your phone interview where you can concentrate and talk openly without worrying about an outside noise, outside noises or people listening. I've had candidates make the mistake of having their phone screen in their work office where they have to whisper, or in their car, which isn't really a good example of a safety professional. A couple of years ago, I had a candidate actually order lunch through a drive-through during a phone interview. That obviously didn't work out too well for him. So really that is some of my information regarding a phone interview. And then there are a couple phone interview styles that or interview styles in general that I want to talk to you about. Technical, situational, and behavioral. Technical is really, as you gain experience, companies will really walk through your resume and ask you specific questions about your experiences. Again, know your resumes. Employers will pick up, if you don't know your stuff. So example, what steps did you take in your previous job when you identified safety deficiencies during an EH&S audit? So it's very, focused and talking about your work experience. Situational are questions more about how, or more future driven, I should say. How would you go about doing something? So for example, how would you handle a plant associate that will not wear their PPE? They're more, they'll draw your analytical and problem solving skills. And then behavioral is what I think Eric and we see all the time. It's similar to situational, but discusses past experiences. So for example, tell me about a time when you had to go against your boss's decision. What was the outcome? Companies like to use this method quite a bit, and we recommend candidates to use a method of response called STAR, and it's in response to behavioral style questions. And Erica will talk about that actually right now.
Perfect, Laura, thank you. Now this goes hand in hand with what Laura was talking about on the types of interview styles. What is the STAR interview method? STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Situation, set the scene and give details of your example. Task, describe the problem encountered or task assigned. Action, explain exactly what steps you took to address it. And result, share the outcome your actions achieved. This offers a straightforward format you can use when answering behavioral interview questions. They prompt you to give real-life examples of how you would handle certain kinds of situations at work. Here are some question starters where you can use the STAR method. Tell me about a time when. What do you do when? Have you ever? Give me an example of. Describe a. Being able to keep the STAR method in the back of your mind will help you do a great job when it comes to an on-site interview. An on-site interview happens a number of different ways. Here are a couple different on-site interviews that you could find yourself in. One-on-one or panel interviews. One-on-one is where you will interview with the hiring manager and is the most common form of interviewing. The second form is panel interviewing. This is where you will interview with the hiring manager, the HR manager, and a member of the team you will be working with. This is one of the reasons why companies use a panel interview is it allows a variety of people in the organization to be a part of the hiring decision. This type of interview can be stressful as you're in front of several people at one time, or it could last longer than a traditional interview because you're meeting with individual people in one setting. Here are some tips on on-site interviews. Come with your resume. Come with a copy of your resume. That way you can go over it with them step by step. Be prepared to answer questions in regard to your experience, successes, accomplishments, failures, and leadership abilities. Do your homework about the company. Come with questions for them. Why is this position open? Where do you see the person in this position being in 2 to 3 years? How to dress for an interview depends on the situation. Is it a corporate interview or is it a plant interview? But overall, new grads typically wear business formal attire, where seasoned professionals tend to wear business casual. As you can see from this slide, there are different types of dress codes. And finally, bring your personality. I know interviewing of any form can be stressful. Just do your homework on the company, know your resume, bring your personality. Always remember to be humble, hungry, and smart, and sell yourself. Do we have any questions in regard to interviewing?
Yes, there's one question for Carl. Should you bring a notepad to write down some information during it?
Eric and I had an interesting conversation about that the other day.
We did.
I think we're kind of torn on that. It really depends on how you handle that. You know, if your head is buried in writing, that's a bad, bad example, I think. I think you really need to be focused and aware of, and making eye contact and, having a full interview. But, there is a way of writing things down. And I don't know, Erica, what do you think about that? I'm kind of torn on that.
I am too. I've seen it done both ways. I think it could even go back to the listening skills of the applicant, of the candidate that you're interviewing. I would probably lean more towards not bringing a notepad.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you send off that thank you letter, you might, ask any additional questions or anything that you might not have understood at that time, maybe. Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer.
Another question on any tips on how to greet the interviewer.
Well, typically, you you would shake their hand. That would probably be the best thing to do, is just to shake their hand, smile, greet them by their last name. That would probably be my tips on how to do that.
And eye contact, obviously, confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. One note I was going to mention too is, in the safety world, like if you're interviewing at a plant, definitely bring your PPE with you. Bring your boots, bring your hard hat, that kind of stuff with you. Even just leave it in your car, and then you can, if they're going to take you through a plant tour, again, it just kind of shows you're prepared. It was just something I was just going to throw out there before I forgot.
Exactly. And to add to that, back when you're doing your research on the company that you're interviewing with, also the interviewer, check them out on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
see what their background has been. It's definitely a nice way to make that connection as well.
Or Eric, do you mind touching base on cover letter usage and when to use those if not requested, and some tips on that, cover letters?
Yeah, I kind of touched on that a little bit. I don't see cover letters. Even years ago, I never really read cover letters because it really was kind of repetitive of what I saw on the resume. So, and the way people apply to jobs right now, everything is really online, and you for the most part don't have an uploading function to put that with your resume, and then if you do put it with your resume, the applicant tracking system may miss out on your resume. So I would say personally no to cover letters, and then when someone if someone reaches out to me by email, it's usually just a short email saying, hey, I'm interested in pursuing things in the job market. Here's my resume. Can we talk? You know what I mean? So there's more of an informal approach to it now. I mean, Erica, how do you feel about that?
I think as far as a new grad would be concerned, I think a cover letter would be nice, just simply because it kind of, they can showcase their soft skills, considering their hard skills in a position of safety might be limited. So that cover letter could actually seal the deal to some managers. So it's definitely
Interesting.
I think if you're a seasoned professional, you probably don't need a cover letter, but if you're a new grad, I probably would put one together.
Another question, should you do extensive research on the company you're applying to? And will the companies ask the interviewer questions regarding their own organizations?
Sometimes they do. So yeah, it's really important to know. Absolutely. Every single company you're interviewing for, I've had companies, kind of test you on what you know. So it's really important to, know as much as you can. And I think I mentioned too, even from a environmental safety perspective, know kind of their needs, like what from, what have been their violations, what have been, issues that they've had in the past, and where do they want to go with it. So absolutely, know your company that you're interviewing for.
Exactly. I know when we do phone interviews, we ask that question, what can you tell us about Safety Management Group? And it's always amazing, the response that we get to that, either by people checking out our website or by people have heard about us word from mouth and our reputation and things like that. So I always ask that question because it's kind of nice to know, what people on the ground are saying.
You guys may have touched on this before, but what's your recommendations if an interview candidate has not heard from a company for a week or 2 weeks, and they want to show their interest, but they don't want to be overly too pushy about their interest in pursuing the job?
Exactly. From my perspective, obviously if you're working with me, we're going to be in constant contact, and I'm kind of like that middleman in between. So that's kind of a nice thing. But if you're on your own, I highly recommend, if you have their email, obviously do not hound them, but touch base with them and send them an email and just letting them know your interest level is still there, and just want to see if there's any steps have been made forward, in the process, and those type of things. So again, you don't want to send an email a day. You don't want to call them every day in a row, 5 days in a row. You kind of got to balance that. And I think after a certain point, if you're not hearing from them after 3, 4, 5 weeks, then you can kind of assume that maybe, they've gone a different direction or filled it with someone else. Again, there's a certain, balance on that. What do you think, Erica?
I would agree with that. And, also as far as the company goes, it's our responsibility to close that loop as well. So, if I've interviewed with someone and I hadn't heard back from them, I will kind of do a follow-up, an update email. And then also our applicant tracking system will send out emails, if they weren't considered for the position and things like that as well. So I think in that regard, I think it's both the applicant and then also the employer's responsibility to keep that loop closed.
Exactly. And I hear, unfortunately, so many times that people do not hear back from companies. So it's, you know what I mean? Some companies have really great systems and letting people know, and others do not. So it really depends on the employer.
Do we have any other questions?
A quiet group today.
It's Friday. And yeah, if anyone has, I just put this up here too. If, Erica and I are open to people reaching out to us if you have any questions or anything like that in the future too.
Yeah, Eric and Laura, and if you're okay with it, since we recorded the webinar today, we'd like to share this with some of our student sections that we have a part of our society. We have Purdue University's up and coming section. We have Indiana State. I think Andy Perry is on the line today. He's their student section advisor, and as well as Indiana University. If that's okay with you, I think it was a great conversation and a lot of takeaways that we can definitely leverage to future candidates.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, if anyone has questions, I'm definitely open to any kind of conversation about that.
Exactly, I am as well.
One question came in here. If a student does not have much experience, what could they do to stand out to get a job opportunity? That's a good question.
That is, so no internship experience, I'm referring to, I would assume.
It doesn't say, it just says if it doesn't have much experience.
Gotcha. Well, obviously internship is, if I can tell you to anybody, you know what I mean, and Purdue and IU and all, the great programs and great internship, programs as well. Anything you can get is, obviously number one is the internship side. But if you can't, if you don't have that, work experience is key. Again, anything you can do, volunteer work, anything that you can add to your resume to get your foot in the door to a company, that's all you can do is just really kind of beef that up in your resume.
And also try to get a letter of recommendation from your instructor. I've seen those, and those have come in handy, especially when those that don't have a whole lot of experience. So definitely try to do that as well.
Great. Any other last questions before we close today, guys? Well, personally, as the president of the Central Indiana chapter of ASSP, I would like to thank you both, Erica and Laura, for being here today. And thanks a lot to Carl Weiser for leading the Emerging Professionals Group and continuing to do new initiatives like this. So Carl, I'll go ahead and let you close out the webinar today. And thanks for all that you guys do.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Erica, and thank you, Laura, for hosting this webinar. There's a lot of great information that is going to be very useful to people coming right out of college or looking to expand their opportunity or change their career path. So thank you again for your time and presenting this, and we'll all be in touch soon. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our meeting.